As an orchestra conductor, I am always very, very excited when I see movies or TV shows coming out about classical music or orchestra conducting, because I just like the idea of what we do, reaching more people and making more people curious. And so when I saw that Maestro was going to come out about conductor Leonard Bernstein, I was very excited. And as a person who has made many, many videos on the internet about orchestra conducting, I also felt like I should make a video about it and tell you how I saw the movie from my point of view, which is incredibly specific. This movie is really not about orchestra conducting. That's not where the focus is. There are, I think, 3 or 4 scenes where he's actually conducting, of which 2 are very small glimpses, and then there are 2 bigger scenes, one where he's conducting like a chorus rehearsal for a while, and the big central scene where he conducts about 5 uninterrupted minutes of the ending of Mahler's Second Symphony. And that scene is what I'm gonna focus the most when talking about conducting. There's also like a 1-minute clip on YouTube that I can use to show you guys some technical things. To break it down, I would say there are about 3 layers of challenges when it comes to this particular scene. The first one is trying to look like an orchestra conductor, just like a conductor. Bradley Cooper was coached by Yannick Nézet-Séguin. He is a legend. I admire him so much. If you ever watch this, please tell me where I can send you my CV. I would love to work with you. But no, he is a really, really successful conductor. He coached Bradley Cooper to look like a conductor. I will say there are some technical things that are not very correct here and there. It's not a deal breaker to me because, let's face it, there are a lot of actual conductors that have very confusing looking gestures. Sometimes you're not very sure if that was a 1 or a 2. They exist. But, you know, if you look very carefully, I think the most common mistake I saw with Bradley Cooper, it's funny to be saying those words, is that most of the times he's conducting in a 4x4. So pretty much the 1 needs to be, you know, here, and then the 2 goes inwards, and then the 3 goes outwards, and then the 4 kind of goes up to prepare for the 1 again. So the most common mistake I see him do from a technical point of view is that he does the 1 and then he goes out and then he goes back in and then back out and then up. I think maybe it's because, you know, it's a very natural thing to land and want to go to the side, especially if you land with a lot of energy, but you have to sort of direct that inward. The idea is that musicians are not looking at you like this. They have to read the music, you know, watch their colleagues, do many things. And so the idea is that each movement has one place, so that if you're roughly kind of observing with the side of your eye, if you see outwards or inwards or up, then you know kind of where you are. But there is a very interesting bit of an interview that Yannick recently made where he said the challenge was teaching Bradley Cooper, let's say, the patterns of conducting, but if he insisted too much on that, that would probably make him be really having to think very actively about not messing up, you know, within the pattern or whatever it is, and that would probably block him. So in that sense, I think that they made a really good job. He looks like a conductor in the sense that he is fully engaged. He doesn't look like someone who's trying to think too hard about what they're doing. The expressions show, you know, the emotion that he's feeling as a conductor within the music. So I think they really did strike balance in that sense. The second layer of challenge that he had to sort of undertake is that Bradley Cooper doesn't just have to look like a conductor, he has to look like Leonard Bernstein. This is quite mind-blowing when you think about it for someone who doesn't know about conducting to have to sort of look half decent as a conductor and then look like a specific conductor. In this aspect, I would say, even though it is at times a little bit extra, it is still effective, because if you showed me that and didn't tell me who he was trying to emulate or look like, aside from all the makeup, I would probably say Bernstein. I probably wouldn't say Claudio Abbado. So all in all, considering this is a movie and Bradley Cooper is an actor and not a trained conductor, do I think he kind of looks like Leonard Bernstein? Yes. Do I think it's a little bit extra? Of course. it's a movie. Obviously, as a conductor, like when I watched it, some things made me kind of giggle, but I don't think that's the point of the movie. It's not to like show people exactly how conducting is. And I think he sort of picked up the general sort of gist of what Bernstein was about. Having said all of that, I am now going to get somewhat technical because I can't help it. The third layer of difficulty is, okay, he has to kind of look like a conductor, he has to look like a specific conductor, and then he has to actually conduct, according to what he set up to do, Mahler's Second Symphony. Mahler's Second Symphony is like every conductor's white whale. We are all dying to conduct this. It is definitely on my bucket list of something I want to conduct before I die, or that I may die whilst conducting just from the sheer joy of being able to do it. I did sing it, and it took everything I had in me to not cry. It would be really long to say why. The piece is amazing, the music is epic, but also you have this 1 hour of music, you know, with every single color, and then you get this choir entrance, this choir that has been sitting there for almost an hour, suddenly enters with just the softest, most and then after this, it builds and builds and builds. It's such an emotional piece. You will see there's a video that compares many conductors doing the ending, this big ending, and everybody goes through something. From the most extra conductors to the most introspective, it breaks every single one of them. So there's that element, but also in the whole symphony, and also specifically in this ending, there are a lot of technical things that one needs to tackle. There are so many tempo changes. It is so many people. You have the huge choir, the huge orchestra. You're trying to, you know, move everybody together. Let me show you a couple of very specific examples. I went to get my score because I'm a nerd. Check this section out. It starts with an indication of pesante, so heavy, for about 8 bars. Instantly switches to something that says piumoso, so a little bit more moved, but it doesn't really say how much, just a little bit faster. That lasts about 5 bars, and then again Mahler writes, go back to being a bit more pesante, hold it back. Not saying exactly how much, you know, you're the conductor, you figure it out. And then the last 2 bars of this whole section also says molto ritenuto, which is retain the tempo as much as you can, make it slower and slower and slower. Each beat needs to be slower than the one before, and then the last section starts. So is Bradley Cooper really conducting all of this? I would dare say no, and this is why. I followed as closely as I could what I heard versus what I saw, and there are some specific moments where he arrives to the point of the beat after the sound. So, you know, the third beat already sounded and was played by everyone, and he arrives a bit late there. And if you are behind the orchestra, you are definitely not leading it. Some other movements kind of were on time, but they didn't have the level of assertiveness that you would need for the orchestra to come in. And on the contrary, they had a lot of hesitation. But some other movements were actually great and quite assertive. And if I were a musician, I would know exactly where to play. Let me show you one right after the other. So this is pretty much like 5 beats in total. The first and second beat is kind of one note. Then for the third beat, he does this very Bernstein thing of sort of opening up like this, and that is super clear. And if I were to play, I would completely be able to play there. But the very next movement, which is what we call elevare, because he's up and has to land on the one, you will see that he does so many movements when he's up there that it makes it kind of almost impossible to know when he's going to land, which is really important because everybody's holding a really high note and it's an important moment. And if you see Bernstein, even though he's also very extra and very big and goes, you know, high up, there is something about the motion of the movement, the energy, the dynamic of it, that you know exactly where you're meant to land. So if I don't think he's conducting, how did they pull this off? Probably through a combination of many things. You see in some behind the scenes videos that Yannick Nézet-Séguin conducted this whole part with the orchestra, like at the moment of recording the movie. So that makes me think perhaps that was like a run through to set general tempos. And so the musicians kind of remember that and do something that fits that mold. You can also see that the first violin is, very obviously conducting everybody that can see him. The orchestra that plays is the London Symphony Orchestra. They know each other very well. They can probably work it out amongst themselves to some extent. I think there was good preparation. I think there was a genuine intention to do it as well as they could, and that they sought out people from the industry and they weren't lazy about it. I think what I hate the most is when I see TV shows or films that don't care. Like, if it looks like it or doesn't look like it, it's not important. And it kind of is. I don't think just for musicians. I don't know. I think there was a real effort behind it. And sure, I can nitpick it all I want. But at the end of the day, I think that's the most important thing. And for the second part of what I thought was perhaps missing for me in the movie, this is from a point of view of me being an orchestra conductor and wanting more people to be curious or connect with the figure of Leonard Bernstein, classical music, conducting. I am coming from that perspective and not from the perspective of a film reviewer, because I am not, So I felt the movie showed way too little the actual things that Leonard Bernstein did that made him Leonard Bernstein, that made him so famous, and that make the dynamic of the movie kind of make sense. He was so innovative with all the TV stuff that he did. He did young people's concerts that were for young people, for some reason wearing ties, but for young kids and people, that were televised, that would bring things from the culture of the moment. He brings this huge machine to play some Bach in it. I don't know what this machine is, but I would imagine that would be like bringing AI today out in a concert to experiment with. He would also talk about pop or rock music of the time with a lot of respect. There is a video where he analyzes some parts of Beatles songs, and it's from 1967. So that was completely contemporary to the Beatles. He just sat down and went like, this is really interesting musically. This is really, they're so experimental. And that would be like the biggest orchestra conductor today sitting down and talking about Taylor Swift or something with respect for the musical things that she does. And they don't really show this much. They don't show him even sort of filming this or thinking about this idea. It gets mentioned in sort of this exposition talk where they're like, oh, you did this, this, and that. But I think if they had shown that, it would help understand why he became so popular and he was so influential and such a part of the zeitgeist of the time. He composed West Side Story, which it gets mentioned, but I think it could have had just a little bit more space in the movie. I don't think they show any part of him composing that at all, aside from some talk about it. All in all, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you don't know about Leonard Bernstein in particular, or classical music, orchestra conducting, I feel like the movie takes a lot of things for granted that you would already have to know. That is missing for me from a perspective of a person that wants to open up our world a little bit more and make people curious about it. Having said that, this movie is not about orchestra conducting, and this movie is not a biopic. And I think all of what I just said is missing, is entirely intentional. The idea was to make it about the central relationship with his wife and a little bit about his private life or family life. Just not the typical biopic where you see all the beats of his career. Having said that, maybe I'm wrong, and just by shedding a light on his life and on kind of who he was as a person, that's enough to make people curious. I am very, very interested to hear from you what you thought about it, or what you think about kind of this, whether it made you curious about Bernstein conducted classical music or not really. But all in all, I'm always happy to see conducting or classical music, in the public eye. So let me know what you thought about it or about the video, and I will see you next time.